Far away out past the moon came a little pink friend all alone. There's a house with a girl inside, such a nice and to his bride. Katie sees a friend in need, Orbie. It's Katie and Orbie, and here's a bunch of stories about Katie and Orbie and all the things they do. Katie's friend Orbie now has a brand new family who teach him that people all have some good inside. Fly a kite, find a snake, camp outside or learn to skate. Build a snowman with your friend Orbie. Fly a kite, find a snake, camp outside or learn to skate. Build a snowman with your friend Orbie. Adventure and playtime should always last a life. And friends like Orbie, the fun is guaranteed. So Katie and Orbie are ready with their story, playing and learning from all the things they do. As the sun begins each day, our new friend is here to stay.
It had been a sleepless night. Katie discovered that when all you can think about is getting up the next morning, it's hard to fall asleep. Orbie found out that even though you count sheep, it's still hard to fall asleep. And they both learned that the dark part of the night lasts a long, long time. They were going to Grandma and Grandpa's house. It was far enough away that they had to take a plane. Katie and Orbie had never been on a plane before, so they were very excited, as you can imagine. Orbie thought that maybe they would spend a day or two at a space station. At breakfast, Dad said, "We will fly, but not straight up like a rocket." Orbie honked. Anywhere up in the sky was good enough for him. Katie and Orbie scurried up to their room and put everything that they could think of into their overnight bags. The bags were stuffed full, and beside them on the floor were 2 pillowcases and a paper bag, also full to overflowing. Mom and Dad came up to check their packing job. Katie assured her that all the right things were packed. Mom thought she should take a quick peek. I guess you know that Mom was a little surprised to see so many toys. Mom said that one would be fine. Dad looked through Orbie's bag. The first thing Dad pulled out was Orbie's spaceship tent. Orbie didn't want to leave it behind. Dad said there was nowhere to set it up at Grandma's house. Something bopped at the side of the paper bag. Katie looked at Orbie, who pretended not to notice the bopping. Mom peeked in and out. Mom smiled and took Chance out of the bag. Chance would have to stay home with Mrs. Perrette. Soon the bags were in the trunk of the car. They waved goodbye to Mrs. Perrette and Chance and were off. At the airport, Dad loaded their luggage onto a cart. He pushed it while Katie steered and Orbie rode on the front, tooting to clear a path for them. When they got to the ticket counter, Mom gave the lady the tickets, and Dad put the bags on a low platform. Suddenly, the platform moved and the bags went with it. They disappeared through a hole in the wall. Orbie honked that the wall had eaten their bags. This surprised Mom and Dad. Dad leaned over and explained that the bags hadn't been eaten. They were riding on a conveyor belt out to the plane. People sat on one part of the plane, and bags sat in the other. The conveyor belt looked like fun. Orbie couldn't wait to see the one made for people. Dad said that people just walked because they had legs. Orbie agreed that that made sense. The room they went in next had lots of windows. Katie and Orbie could see their airplane right outside. It was huge. They could even see the drivers. Dad said the driver of an airplane was called a pilot. Katie and Orbie waved. The pilot pointed to them and waved back. Soon it was time to get on the plane. They walked down a long, sloping hallway and around a corner. They walked through a round door, and 2 airline people greeted them. The man and the woman were flight attendants, Mom said. They looked after the people on the plane. Orbie thought they were still in the hall, but Dad pointed out that they were already on the plane. Dad found their seats. Katie sat next to a tiny window. Orbie sat beside her, and then Mom. Dad's seat was across the aisle from Mom. The 2 friends peered out the tiny window. Katie laughed and Orbie tooted when they saw how high up they were. Mom told them they were still on the ground. Katie couldn't believe it. When Katie and Orbie looked out the tiny little window, they saw men in little carts driving around underneath the plane. One cart had their suitcases on it. Dad said they had to fasten their seat belts just like in the car. The flight attendant showed everyone how to do it. Katie and Orbie watched the airport building go by. Then when they were out in the middle of a big field, Dad said, "Here we go." The plane started to move faster and faster. Katie and Orbie started to bounce in their seats. Katie opened her mouth to say something when, whoosh, the plane was in the air. Katie looked out the window and saw buildings and roads getting smaller and smaller. Orbie looked out the window, too. He burbled to Dad, and Dad said that airplanes don't orbit the Earth. Grandma and Grandpa didn't live that far away. Slowly they rose up through the clouds. Katie worried that they would bump when they hit them, but Dad explained that they were made of moisture. When the 2 friends looked down on the clouds, it looked like a fairyland. Orbie said he would watch for dragons, but I have to tell you that he didn't see any. Soon, an announcement said that there would be a movie. The attendant handed out headphones, and everybody plugged them in to listen. Little screens flipped down from the ceiling and looked just like a row of little TVs. The movie was funny, and Mom and Dad and Katie and Orbie all laughed at it. When the movie was over, the attendant offered Katie and Orbie some crayons and coloring books. The coloring books had pictures of planes and all the people Katie and Orbie met who worked on the plane. They colored them in. Soon it was lunchtime. Mom showed Katie and Orbie that hiding in the back of the chairs were fold-down tray tables. Lunch was served in funny little plates and dishes on a square tray. A little later, the friendly attendant asked if they wanted to see the cockpit. They hurried up the aisle and saw the little room with all the lights and buttons. In front of the pilots was a great big window. Through it, they could see where they were going. The pilot told them that they could fly the plane at night or even in the clouds, even if they couldn't see out the window. He showed Katie and Orbie the computer that helped him do that. Back in their seats, they felt the plane dipping down. It was time to land. The wheels touched the runway, and the plane was on the ground. When they were getting off, Katie and Orbie thanked the flight attendants. The pilot gave them a set of wings to show that they'd been on the airplane. Mom, Dad, and Katie and Orbie followed the rest of the people off the plane. Inside the building, they heard, "Katie, Orbie!" There were Grandma and Grandpa. Flying on the plane had been great fun. I hope that one day you'll have a turn, too. Then maybe you'll see the cockpit and get a pair of flying wings, just like Katie and Orbie.
Did you know? Did you know? Did you know?
You can change the color of a flower by giving it colored water to drink. Just put a white flower into a glass and add blue, red, or green food coloring. The next day, your flower won't be white anymore.
It had been a wonderful day. Katie discovered that if you want to draw enough pictures to decorate the wall all the way around your room, you need more than an hour. Orbie found that you can make a lovely new color when you mix two different paints together. And they both learned that even though neither of them could play the guitar or the piano, it's a lot of fun to pretend you can. Katie was standing on the bed holding her magic wand. She was keeper of the wind, and she commanded the wind to stop and rest. Orbie, who was whirling around on the floor, flopped down and lay flat. Katie told him that now he was the king, and she was the queen. Orbie sat up. "We'll need a castle," he burbled. Katie lowered her wand. Orbie was absolutely right. What kind of queen doesn't have a castle? Orbie jumped up and stuck himself to the wall. Maybe he could be a wizard and she could be his assistant, and they could build the grandest castle ever. Without the slightest hesitation, they set to work. They agreed that for this castle to be wonderful, they'd need every single block on the shelf. They pulled them off into huge piles. In the living room, Mom heard a lot of thumping and bumping. She decided to go up and make sure everything was all right. When she got to the room, she found Katie and Orbie busy at work. They were building a huge castle that took up a whole lot of the floor. Even though they just started it, Mom could tell that this was going to be extraordinary. The doorbell rang. Katie and Orbie seemed not to hear because they were so busy planning their structure. Yi Ping was at the door, and she asked if Katie and Orbie could play. Mom told her to head on up because they were very busy in Katie's room. When Yi Ping opened the door, she saw a big mess. There were blocks and things everywhere. She asked Orbie what they were doing, and he tooted. They were building a mighty castle. Yi Ping said she would make a dragon. She would stick it up in the front of the castle to scare away bad people. Katie clapped her hands. Yi Ping always had good ideas. So while Katie and Orbie built, Yi Ping made a wonderful dragon out of clay. Soon the doorbell rang again. When Mom opened it, Dakota was there. He wanted to play too. Mom told him to head up to the room. When Dakota opened the door, Katie called to him to be careful not to push the door too far. It would knock part of the castle over. Dakota was very careful. He looked at the structure on the floor and said that it was going to be beautiful. He helped Orbie balance some blocks. And then he had an idea. He told his friends that Yi Ping had made a great dragon to scare away people. Maybe he should make a brave eagle to show that the king and the queen were brave and strong people. Everyone thought this was a wonderful idea, too. Dakota set straight to work. Orbie decided that this being a magic castle, they would have a small landing pad for spaceships. After all, he was the king. There wasn't much room left on the floor, so he built it out the door and into the hall a little bit. Kira bopped up the stairs. When Orbie saw her, he asked her to be very careful of the landing pad, and of course she was. Now Kira couldn't even get into the room. He told her friends that the castle was the best one she'd ever seen. Then she pointed out that even kings and queens get sick. Maybe it would be a good idea to add a small hospital. There wasn't even one block left, so Kira went downstairs and asked if she could borrow some of Mom's boxes for recycling. Mom gladly gave her some and asked how things looked upstairs. Kira told her it looked fantabulous. Soon all the friends were finished with the castle, and I have to say that it was a marvelous thing. It had turrets and bridges and high walls and a moat and, well, it had everything. They called Mom up to admire it. Almost no one could fit into the bedroom anymore because it took up so much space. Mom saw the hospital and the landing pad in the hall. As she got closer to the bedroom, she could tell that the castle was a masterpiece. She took a picture of everybody standing beside it. The 5 friends smiled proudly. When it was time for all the friends to go, Mom thought maybe they should help clean up. no one wanted to take the castle down. Mom agreed that it could stay up until Dad got home. Later, when she was carrying the laundry up through the hall, she had trouble getting around the hospital. When Katie went up to change her shirt, she couldn't get close to the dresser and for sure couldn't open the drawer. Orbie's rocket was in the closet, and it had to stay there. Moving around the room was tricky. When Dad came home, he admired the beautiful castle. He couldn't believe all the work the friends had put into it. Then Mom asked them to get started on tidying it up. Still, nobody wanted to touch it. After a lot of thinking, Mom said that it could stay up for one more day. Katie and Orbie were very happy. But when Dad went in to get a story, he knocked Yi Ping's dragon off the castle by mistake. And when Mom went in to get pajamas from the dresser, some of the castle just had to go. When it was time for bed, Orbie had to knock down another little part to open the closet. Mom and Dad said goodnight from the door because there wasn't room in the bedroom for both of them. Katie looked at the castle with some of the parts broken and told Orbie it was still beautiful. Orbie agreed. In the night, Katie had to use the washroom. She tried carefully not to step near the blocks, but it was hard. On the way back, her toe pushed one block that made others fall. When she nestled back into her bed, her teddy bear slipped off and knocked over even one more block. The next morning, Katie and Orbie sat in her bed. The castle was still wonderful, but the truth was that they couldn't do almost anything with the castle in the way. Katie told Orbie that as much as she hated to break this one up, she had other castles hiding in her mind. When Orbie thought about it, so did he. So with a whoop and a shriek and a thunderous thumping, the mighty castle fell. The two friends talked about the next castle they would make. Already, they had some good plans. And when you have things to put away, I hope that you remember all the new ideas that are hiding in your mind waiting for a turn to be used. I know you have a lot of them.
Did you know?
No.
Did you know? Did you know? Bread is baked into different shapes, sizes, and flavors. Pumpernickel is dark and crusty. French bread is long and skinny. Egg bread can be braided like hair. And pita bread can be made into a pocket.
It had been a morning full of snowflakes. Katie discovered that even if you catch a snowflake in your hand, it melts before you can admire it. Orbie found out that sometimes when you throw the snow off your shovel, it blows back in your face. And they both learned that decorating the front yard with snow angels is a pretty thing to do. At lunch, while Katie and Orbie were eating hot soup and sandwiches, Dad talked to Mom about water conservation. Dad said that people just had to work harder to save water. Mom nodded her head and agreed. As they put on their snowsuits, Katie asked Orbie if he knew how to help save water. Orbie shook his head. He knew about the universe and the stars, but not about water. Soon, Katie and Orbie were busy making snowballs. Orbie made a big lumpy one. Katie found some stones on the sidewalk and made a snowball with a face. It made Orbie laugh. Katie took it in to show Mom and Dad. Mom was upstairs pulling winter clothes out of the closet. She laughed too when she saw the snowball. Dad was down in the basement fixing a chair. Katie showed him the snowball. Dad told her it was terrific. Then he told her that if she wanted to keep it, she'd better head outside. It would melt in the house. As Katie walked up the basement stairs, she noticed that her mitt was getting all soggy. In a flash, Katie raced outside. Orbie was making a pile of snowballs. Katie shouted as she ran out the door. She had a fabulous idea. She'd thought of a way to save water. They would collect all the snow they could and put it in the bathtub. That way they'd save a whole bathtub full. Orbie wondered where the water came into it. Katie reminded Orbie that snow turns into water when you warm it up. Within seconds, they were loading up pots and buckets and dragging them across the snow to the door. It was a bit heavy, but together they could do it. Next, they brought the buckets and pots into the house and up the stairs. Katie popped the plug into the tub, and they dumped their buckets of snow in. It made a soft swooshing sound, and Orbie burbled his amazement. They both looked at the tub. There was still a lot of tub to fill, but there was no problem because they had a whole neighborhood full of snow. They hurried out to collect more. Up and down they went, one trip after another. After what seemed like 100 trips, they were finally finished filling the tub. Katie was happy that the water was safe. Orbie was happy, too. They were both soaking wet and pretty tired. Saving water was a lot of hard work. In Katie's room, they tugged off their snowsuits and tried to think of what to do next. Within a very few minutes, the two friends, both holding books, fell sound asleep. Mom peeked in and saw Katie and Orbie asleep, holding books. She thought they looked cute. She went to get Dad. Dad smiled when he saw them. He covered them up and took the books away so they could sleep comfortably. Mom discovered the snowsuits. She went into the washroom to hang them up. In the washroom, the air was a bit colder than it should be. Mom looked at the tub. She was surprised to see that it was piled full of snow. That didn't make any sense. Then she looked at the soaking suits and knew how the snow got there. Dad came in behind her. He was surprised to see the snow, too. They giggled all the way down to the living room. They tried to figure out what Katie and Orbie were up to. Much later, when the friends woke up, they checked the bathroom. There was the tub full of water. Katie's plan had worked perfectly. Dad came in and asked why they put the snow in the tub. Katie explained that the streams and lakes needed everyone to help save water. So she was collecting snow and saving it in the bathtub. Dad smiled and congratulated Katie and Orbie for trying to do something about a very real problem. This was a wonderful idea, but not very practical. Snow would make a very chilly bath, and the water would make the house damp and cold. You'd have to be a polar bear to want to be in that. Then Dad told them he had some ideas on saving water, and he would share them. As they walked down the stairs, he explained that it wasn't about saving water in the tub, although that was a fine idea. In part, saving water was about keeping it clean in the first place. It was important not to put poisonous or dirty things into the water. Dad explained that this meant things like old paint and greasy oil. These mix with the water and pollute it. This reaches the plants that live in it and around it, and the animals that drink it and the fish that swim in it, and it makes them all sick. The big companies that pumped lots of this poisonous garbage into the water were now trying very hard to clean it up and not pollute anymore. Katie and Orbie clapped their hands about that one. That was important. Dad said another way to save water was to leave the car at home when they could. Orbie scratched his head and burbled. Well, how could not driving a car help save water? I'm glad you asked, Dad said. He explained that the fumes from the exhaust pipe of the car are very poisonous. They float up into the sky and get stuck in raindrops. When it's time to rain, all of that stuff rains right back down to the rivers and the lakes and the forest and all the animals again. They walked into the kitchen. Mom was washing the pots and buckets. Katie and Orbie helped dry. Dad pointed out that the second part of conserving water had to do with them. Mom said that they could help by using water wisely. That meant keeping a jug of cold drinking water in the fridge instead of running the tap until it was cold enough. They could also turn the water off while they were brushing their teeth so that it wasn't pouring out for nothing and being wasted. Dad added that taking showers sometimes instead of baths was good too because showers use less water. Katie and Orbie loved showers. That night for fun, they tried the chilly snow water bath. Oh, but nobody got more than a toe in. Orbie tooted that he wasn't a polar bear for sure. Both friends were happy there was a better way to save water. Most of all, Katie was glad that we could all make a difference. And I know that if you think about it, you'll find a way to help save water for the earth too. Because the earth really matters to all of us.